Hi, welcome to Devon and Cornwall Microsoft Power BI User Group. We've got a great session today from Cristian Prifti all about Power BI and Power Automate and how they work well together to enable you to provide actions from your Power BI semantic model. We break for Christmas, but in January we have Chris Webb joining us, talking all about Fabric and how, as a Power BI user, we're already heavily engaged with Fabric, followed by some other fabulous speakers. So, in the meantime, I'd like to hand you over to Cristian, who will take us through an interactive session all about Power Automate and Power BI. And over to the amazing, the wonderful, and the fabulous and my friend, Cristi Prifti, who is going to be taking us on to a second session all about Power BI and Power Automate and what you can do with it, which I'm really interested to know many more details. So I'm going to stop sharing and hand over to Cristi. Here we go, Cristi. The stage is yours.
Okay. Again, no pressure. I mean, you didn't even set the bar too high. Hello, everyone. Cristian Prifti. You can call me Cristian Prifti. I go by both names. I don't mind using the family name since I'm used from work. Now, I'm not going to introduce myself for the second time. I'm just going to say that I've been having fun with Power Automate for some time now, while working with as an actual solution architect for Power BI solutions. But we just learned that the magic between them can actually help us a lot. Now, I'm going to share my screen so that we do a small recap of what we did in the first session, so that we do have a starting point. Let me just shift this one. Actually, I'm just going to put it up so that I can also see you. So, in the first session, we did what we should never be doing, actually, which was we took and extracted data out of the dataset and sent it per email. So we went back to the same old question around how can I get this into Excel? We just provided the answer. But there is a caveat to that, because we can use the mix between Power Automate and the Power BI dataset, and which is now called semantic model. We should get used with the new wording, to drive some actions in terms of maybe I don't need to send a report, but maybe I just want to tell my user what his metric value was for the last week, what he needs to do for the next week. So I might just put in some data out so that I can leverage it within Power Automate flows. Our flow was a recurrent one, so it was running on a schedule. Funny enough, after the session, I did forget to turn it off. So of course I did get the email saying the last 3 weeks. So at least we know that it's still working. We did run the query, and we are not going to deep dive into how we generate it because we are going to generate some DAX queries also today. And then we learned how we are going to deal with the data. So we had the create CSV step in which we learned how we take the output, which is a JSON array, from the action statement to run the DAX query against the dataset and then transpose it into a CSV. We had to take the array and then transpose it into a CSV. We also learned that we can customize the columns, which was done through the advanced option. Now you see them already on because I did activate it. So that's why you also already see the mapping here. Normally you would not. And we learned how we can write a statement, because that was a statement that we had to write as an expression, even though you see it now as being part of the output of the first table rows. So let me see if I can deep dive into it, but I don't think I can. Luckily enough, I do have it saved so that we can just quickly take a look at the statement that we wrote when we extracted the information. So I'm just going to use the old simple notepad for this. And
it was a syntax, wasn't it, that we were interested in before?
Correct.
That was which was a challenge.
Yep. We had the item statement, which was telling that it's going to take each item one by one. Then we had the save operator, which was the question mark. And then we had the last item, which was the actual column name. Now, here was the trick, and this was the part where we also had the challenges, is you might get confused by the square brackets, because we have the first set of square brackets and then we have the second one. Now, the first one, which is the outer square brackets, that's the power fx structure. So I need to actually have those brackets, and that's how I'm going to tell it which field it is. The inside bracket was just part of the string that was coming out of the output from the Power BI semantic model. So this is how the column
I
was named,
see.
including the square brackets.
I see.
That's why we have the double square brackets, but that's why we also have them within quotation marks. Whatever sits within the quotation marks, that's just going to be a string.
And I suppose
within Power Automate.
item is similar to row in Power Query. So it's for each row. Yeah.
Each column.
Each column.
Yep. We are going to see the rows, which is items.
I see.
Good. So let me just close this one. We renamed it. We also got the bookings, all fine and dandy. We then sent out the email. Now, today we are going to complicate it a bit, because our initial thought process was, how can we get a list of our users that need to be informed about the future bookings that they have with customers, get the data out for each individual user one by one, so that I can send him a personalized notification. What we did initially was just extract a bulk of information and then send it out to the users. Now, each and every user got the same attachment, so there was no personalization in it. Good, so let's get started with that. First reminder from the previous session, in order for us to be able to do that, we need to have a published semantic model, so the report needs to be published. And I also had a recommendation in the first session, and I will emphasize this: try to avoid doing something like this if you are running on a premium capacity. Please don't give possibly your admins a heart attack when the consumption will actually rise. The model that I'm actually presenting you right now is using a pro licensing model, exactly because I know that the computation power will not spike.
Okay. So do you have experience of making it spike?
I never managed to, but I'm thinking that it's possible, because I've heard about somebody who took my idea and used it as part of a Power Automate solution, a temporary Power Automate solution, in which they were receiving daily an export from the ERP system. They need to perform some comparisons in the data and then write some data back to a SharePoint list, which was then further getting consumed by Power Apps. The volume was big, so the person was dealing with almost on a daily level around 150,000 records, which were getting written.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how the premium capacity actually behaved there, to be honest. He never said that somebody contacted him, but I would, if it wasn't a high capacity, I would have expected to see a spike in there.
Yeah. That's a good thing to know.
Good, so let's take a look at our model to remember a bit. We have the calendar, we have our fact table, and then we have a table that we are actually going to use today, which is dimension table used for the dynamic row level security. But we are going to deep dive a bit into it later. Now, let's start off with how will we generate the query, because until now we only had the query running on a bulk operation. So we are extracting the whole data which was coming in the future. Now we also need to set a filter on the user level. Why we need to do that is because we'll need to be able to filter out the query for each user individually. So we are running, if we have 4 users, we are going to run 4 queries. And there is a side note. Whoever is more familiar with Power Automate would actually say yes, but we can set that filter also in Power Automate to filter our array, and that's right. But the purpose of the session was to actually show how we can combine queries in Power Automate. Now, what we need first, because in order for us to loop, we will need the list of users, correct? That's our first part that we are going to start with. And for this one, we are going to use the new tax review that we have.
Oh, good.
So I'm not going to generate a new table. I'm just going to go in here. You can see that I did some tests already and they're getting stored. That's the beauty of it. Good. Now let's write a very simple statement. So I'm going to say distinct, evaluate, distinct, and then I'm going to search for the username. Good. Let's run it. We get the 3 users for which we need to export the data. So we have the table as an output. That's the table we are going to work with. That was the statement that we used. So let's take this one. Let's go back to Power Automate. And for the sake of it, I don't want to destroy the old one, so we are just going to add a parallel track. That is the amazing part of having Power Automate being able to run 2 separate tracks.
I haven't used this yet, using parallel tracks.
There are 2 sides of it. So you can use it in case you want 2 things to actually run in parallel where this is possible. There can be cases where you want to run 2 separate tracks and it will actually work. Let me just find the no, it's actually run a query. So we search for run a query. Of course, we can also select the Power BI category in here and then narrow down the search to not see all the other categories. Or we can, if we see it down below, we can just select it. I am on the actions tab, and it's important because here we have both actions and triggers. Let's not confuse them. So run a query, and now, so to your point, you can have 2 things when we're running parallel tracks. Either they will run in parallel, or I can change the behavior, because if I go here to the more options on the top right corner, and I'm going to go to the, why don't I see the option? Okay, he's telling me that I can't do it directly after the trigger, but let me show you here. So I can define for them to either run in parallel, or I can check when they should run. So I can have one when run, which is going to run when the previous step got successfully completed.
Yeah.
Or I can just have an error one, and I can say, you know what, you can run this one when this is going to be not successful. So it's going to fail, it's going to be skipped, or it's going to have a timeout. What's going to change is the symbol that you are going to see right here. See that it turned from black to the dotted red.
Ah, that's lovely.
So that's also an option which can be used in case of error messages. Let's leave it like this because now I don't want, now when I'm going to test it out, I'm not going to continue running also the first track on it. So what we need to fill in here, and let me zoom in a bit so that you can see it better. So workspace. On the workspace, I can either select and from the list of workspaces that I have access to, because it's my account who's authorizing this transaction, this action right now. So let's take the demo automate in case you ever have a service account that you want to use for such things, which is a recommended best practice to not use your own personal account because your account might get deactivated when you leave the company. You can actually go here to the more options menu, and here you can see the connections that are available, or you can create a new one. We are going to select our booking, and then we are just going to paste the query that we just copied from the other side. We are going to save it. We are going to test it out. But before that, we are also going to add our compose step.
Remind me, compose is a way of taking it and holding it so that you can do more things.
Correct. We are going to take just a bit of the output array that Power BI is going to give us, because Power BI, the output of the run a query against a data set is going to give us or a full-blown array, which is going to have multiple levels. We are only interested in one specific level out of that array. And we are using the compose to actually only take the piece and work with that.
Yeah, so it just gives us, like a building block. Fernando said, question is, why do you include the evaluate part? The DAX
because
query.
I am generating a table, so I need the evaluate function.
Yeah, okay.
Good. So from the menu, we open up the dynamic content. We are only interested in the first table rows, which is going to be the query results as an array form. So that's what we were discussing before. We don't want to work with the first one and the actual body. We just want to get our data. So our data we will get from the first table rows. We are going to select
an array of rows is the same as a table, isn't it?
Correct.
Yeah.
But let's write out. So we are going to manually trigger it. We are going to run the flow. He's going to show us live how he runs it at which step is it. He finished. We know that it was successful because otherwise we would have had a red error message in here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go and check it out. So this is the output that he gave us. We have our 3 users. In case I want to see the full-blown array structure, I can just click on show row outputs, and that's the full structure of the array that I could have worked with. Now, we chose the first table rows because that was our easiest route towards the data. If you look at the rows in here, you see that I do have also the same thing in here, but I would have needed to access the body, access the results, access the table, access the rows, and only then I would have gotten to my values. Like this, I was on a fast track. So I said, I just want this one where I directly have the values that I want to work with. And now let's see what the compose step did. So the compose step directly provided us data that we want to work with. Now, in order for us to do that, we need to create a loop because we are going to run some queries for each user. So let's search for apply. And you'll see here the apply to each function. Again, we need to select, okay, what is it that we are going to loop on? And we are just going to say the output of the compose step. You can see here that whenever you will work with multiple outputs, there is a caveat to it. All of them are called outputs. You'll need to pay attention to how the step is named, because that's going to be your indicator if you are on the right one or not.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we selected it. We are good, but we now still need to be able to get only the username. We don't want the column and the value. We just want the value. So we are going to add a step. Go to compose again. And in here, we will need to write some PowerFX. Now, let's not kill ourselves a bit. So let's open up a notepad again, because writing in this very small window can sometimes be daunting. No.
JP said the importance of naming steps in Power Automate, critical part of renaming them.
Yes, but I didn't do it for a purpose.
Ah, oh no, I think he's just, yeah.
But he's right, yes. Renaming your step and more important, whenever you can, to actually have like camel case or something like this is definitely something that helps. Now, in order for us to get the user, now we are going to loop. So we are going to use the items function. Now the items function is going to ask me, or okay, where am I? And we are actually in the apply underline to each. And that's why I didn't rename the step, because I wanted to show this part.
Yeah.
Whenever we have steps which have a space in another naming convention, let me make this one smaller and put it here so that we can compare it. So my name was
brilliant.
apply space to each. Fernando, no, I will disappoint you. I am running away from the new Power Automate canvas for the moment. So each space that I have is going to be represented here by an underline.
It's things like this that catch you, and you can spend hours trying to suss it out, can't you? If you don't find the right page on Google or something, or
correct, or have the intuition to
Copilot.
just use something and then see how he does it, or ask Copilot. But I was a bit disappointed of Copilot in Power Automate, to be honest. I tried it out. I will admit.
I'm sure it'll get better. It learns, doesn't it?
That's for sure. But I think one of the things that I was a side note, what I didn't like is in order to use the Copilot, I also need to use the new canvas. And I had lots of bugs and parity features on the new canvas, which were not there.
Okay.
So for the moment, I'm going to stay away from the new canvas, which means I also need to stay away even on the dev tenant from Copilot for the moment. Now, we did tell him, okay, that's a step. We are now going to use the save operator. And now we remember that we needed to use the square brackets because now we need to tell him the field name. If we are not sure what the field name was called, what we can actually do is I'm just going to open up a new tab with the flows. Let's open this one, and I'm going to go to the history run. Because on the history run, no, my mistake. I opened it to edit it. I just want to see the histories. So let's go here, and now I can see how it's called. So it's dynamic RLS username. I can copy this one from here and go back to our little notepad. And then again, the brackets, because I'm just going to tell him a field name. So it needs to be within the quotation marks, the simple quotation marks. And now let's see what happens. We are going to copy this one, go back to our compose tab, type it in, and then OK. Now this step we are going to rename. Let's save it. And then just run it. And we are going to see if we did a good job or a bad job. Apparently we did a good job. Green tick, we are happy. Now we see for the history, it had 3 loops. That's correct because we did have 3 users in our export. And we see that if I'm going to scroll through my use cases in here, I'm going to go to the next one. He does it right. So I know that he's looping correctly, and I know that he's extracting it correctly.
That's brilliant. It's just things like that, knowing how to write the code to loop, that just saves so much time by watching it.
And I see we also have a question from Fernando. Yes, I could have went and written it directly also in the Power FX directly. Okay, now let's go back because now we are in the stage in which we have our user list. We broke it down, so we are now at the user level. Now we have the step where we are going to run the queries individually for each user. And for this, to make our life easy, because like Cristi is mentioning, we like to be efficient, even though we can admit that we are just lazy. So I have my table in here. That was a pure simple generated table. And I applied 2 filters on it. First, I just filtered out the user so that I see how he generates the code for me. The second one was there since ever because I only want my future bookings. So I only want to tell my users, okay, that's the number of users, that's the number of bookings that you are going to have in the upcoming week. So that's why we have a filter on the week offset, which is part of the calendar. But let's see what code he's going to generate for us. And for this, let's go to the, we are on the new one. Or actually we can do it also from here. Performance Analyzer. We are going to start the recording. And what we are going to do now is just go back. Remember, we can filter out we can refresh also a single visual, so we don't need to filter out to refresh the whole page. So I just went over the visual, and now I see that I have a new icon appearing in here because I have the recording on. So let's click on analyze this visual. We see that it ran, we have it here. The amazing part is before we had to click on copy query, go to a editor and do it. Now we also have running a DAX query view. So the moment we click it, it created us a new tab in here, which is pretty nice.
Do that again. I missed that. So you ran it from Performance Analyzer and then it popped it straight in.
Correct, because before we only had the
I
options
haven't
which were
seen
stopping
that.
here.
Yeah. I haven't
Now
seen
we
that
also
running
have
DAX
the
query view.
amazing option to run it here.
Nice.
Good. Now let's go back because we still need to twist it up a bit. Remember, whenever we work with a table, there's a pagination that the Power BI report is going to do.
I like
So
seeing how
doesn't
they
load.
write the DAX. When you get them to write the Performance Analyzer and you see it, I like seeing how Power BI generates DAX.
Yep. And the amazing part is now I see how he wrote the filters. So I see here the filter that we had on the week offset, and then I have here the filter that we are going to make dynamic, which is the amazing part in it.
Yeah.
Then he's just calculating the table with the two filters that we defined in the first two variables, which is pretty nice. What we need to delete is the pagination that he does for the table measure. So the whole primary window is going to go away. If I'm doing that, of course, I need to also update the step. So the evaluate, you can see that it triggers an error because the step doesn't exist anymore. Let's take this one. We are just going to copy it and we go back in here. Let's search for today's favorite. Okay. Now, here is a nice trick that you can use. I would not want each and every time to go in and select the details. So I would have two options. For somebody who's more used to Power Apps, for example, you can create a solution. In a solution, you can have global variables that you can use. The alternative in here would be to use variables in which I would assign, for example, the workspace ID. Why? Because if I'm going to open up this one right here, I do see the options of the workspaces that I have access to. Now imagine you would have access to some hundreds. That would be the whole list that you would need to scroll. But I also have here the option of enter custom value. And now we are going to try it out. So let's make it a custom value. Then I'm going to go back to our fancy report. We are going to open it up. And first we need a workspace. So actually, let me see if I can move this one a bit from here. If it would want to, no, it doesn't want to. Let's make it even more bigger. So we see that if we open a report, we have the group with the GUI ID. That's the actual workspace ID that comes here. Then we have the report with its ID. So we have these two. When I'm selecting it manually from the drop-down list, in the backend, he's still going to save the GUI ID. So it's still the ID that he's going to save. So if we want to do a test now, what we can actually do is, and just copy this one from here. Let's go back in the editor. We are still on the custom value. And I'm just going to paste the ID in. The same thing we are going to do for the dataset. So let's go back. We look where we have the report section, and we are just going to copy the ID from here. Good. Now, because I did this, no, because I wasn't on the custom value. Sorry, my bad. So now I'm actually working with the report IDs, not with their selection. And you will see shortly why I see this. So let's go back and also copy the code again because we lost the clipboard. We are going to paste it in here. Let's make it again full screen. And there was still a change that we needed to perform because we had here the user ID, which was hard coded. So right now we would be working, come on, hide. Unbelievable. Good. Now we deleted it. So I see the brackets, which was the array that we are going to have, the list actually. So let's go inside. Let me zoom in a bit so that I have to see what I do. And since I closed this one, come on. Bam, bam, bam. That's a bit weird. Show us the dynamic components. Got, now it appeared because I need to zoom out. So here we have the user ID that we extracted. As I was saying, outputs are always called outputs. So we need to watch the step, extract the user ID. And hopefully he also did edit it and he also wants to go away. If he does want to go away, we are just going to go to a different step. Let's zoom in a bit so that we see what he actually did. Because I have my doubts he did it right. And no, he did not. So we were here on the tree test step.
Yeah.
We go within the brackets and then we add the user ID. Now we should be okay. So if I'm going to click outside and zoom in a bit, I see I have the values within the square brackets.
Yeah.
The curly brackets, sorry. So let's save it and test it out. Again, it's going to be manually. I'm not going to use the previous flow that ran successfully. And no, we do have an issue, which is going to be fun to solve.
Oh, we like it when it's like this. It makes us all think. You'll see everyone now will be looking into the screen to try and see what it is first.
The downside of getting errors on the run a query is that he tells us a lot of details. So as you can see right here, he did show us a lot of information that might help us to actually fix it, which was only the fact that he was not able to find it. Now, let's go to edit a bit. And we are going to go back in here and we are going to go on the history that failed. I want to see why it failed. So let's go in here. Let's go into this tab and let's see what he did do. So I see that he ran it for the user A. Now my user A was a string. If I go back to the query, I see that when I deleted it, I deleted also the brackets, the double quotes that were making it a string. So let's go back. We are not going to use this one. We are still going to use this one. And inside the curly brackets, we are going to add our double quotes. Let me also make sure that I did it right. And I did. Let's save it.
So you've got quotes before the purple bit and after where it says outputs.
Correct, because it needs to see it as a string. That's why also in the query in here, we did add the string value.
The run history is nice that you can go and you can see.
Yeah, I just want to take exactly the same one that failed after I did a change and see if it's going to work. It's running, so that's a good sign. Partially. Okay, that's an interesting error message. Now, let's see what was the query that he ran. So we had the keep filters that work correctly. So that one is fine. We know that there can't be something because we didn't really change something in here. Then we had in here the 3 tasks, which now is exporting it for user A. So the query is looking exactly the same like we were having it here. So nothing is different. We had the booking ID. Okay, and then let's see what we are returning. So the DS score is the calculate table. That's still fine. It's summarizing the values that we want to. And it's keeping the 2 filters on. It's interesting. Unless I did copy something wrong.
I always find I learn so much more when things don't go smoothly, because you know you have to really engage your brain to try and work it out.
Let me
So
try something because I'm really curious about something.
it's the whole troubleshooting thing that, you know, really it makes you understand more.
Actually, no, let's leave it still with the history and let's see what happens. Okay, that was a bit weird.
I don't like it when things go wrong for me when I'm presenting, though. I'll just say that.
Why I did went back, and I can show you this one here. I noticed that something wasn't running successfully when he was using the IDs.
Yes.
If I go to the apply each and I see it in here. Okay, before it looked a bit different.
Yeah.
And that's why I went into it, because I was seeing he was providing me the display name for one of them, but not for the second one. So I had the workspace name displayed here, but I didn't have the actual semantic model name in here, because this is something he should do.
So you basically had the wrong string in the data set.
Can be that I copied something wrong by mistake. Now we are not going to spend the time because I know you are going to call me out when the hour is over.
Ah, yoga's not on tonight.
Now you're telling this.
Henry said, can you run one of the run history output in Power BI desktop model create table?
I'm not sure that I understand the question.
History output. Just to debug.
Ah, yeah, true. But in here, for example, I would have been for sure sure that it ran, because we just took the code and changed something. Our issue was on the inputs we are providing to the actual action.
Yeah.
So our issue was at the header level.
Yeah. Okay, cool.
Well, Anthony, they should actually.
I know.
We just don't know when this will happen. It's just going to surprise us.
So the one that worked was when you used the name.
Yep.
Cool.
I mean, if you want, we can still try it out. I can still go back and make sure that I copy the correct string, because that's the report ID. So that's the one we should be using. Let me again close this one. I'm going to go into the custom value and try it out again. Let's save it and then just test it. If it's working, it's working. If it's not, we can report the bug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look,
yeah.
here,
so it likes
here
the
is
name.
where I've seen it. So the first ID he's able to recognize. The second one he won't.
Yeah. Okay.
Because he is actually right. I'm the one who didn't pay attention, and now I realize that after I did some tests, I still have my Power BI in German. Okay. I did it wrong because I copied the report ID. I didn't copy the dataset ID.
Ah, I see. That's good. We know not to do that. It has to be the data set, not the report. Cool.
So let's go into it, update it, save it, and take the history run. Good, and now we know that we are good.
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Now,
Yeah.
why I did want to use the IDs is because I could have had a step in here. I could have added an action, initialize variable, initialize. I could have called it workspace ID.
Yeah.
Of course, it would have been a string, and then I could have copied in here. And I could have been able to use it each and everywhere that I would actually want further on. Now, if I'm going to migrate this report from its current location to a new workspace, for example, this means I need to go into my flow and change each and every action individually. So at every step that I had a run a query, I will need to go in and update again the workspace. If I would have been using the ID, I would have only changed it once at the header, and this would have propagated further down.
Perfect.
But no. Weirdly enough, he shifted our sites. That's fine. We don't mind it.
Ah, well, that's another good thing to know, that it will shift it, because
yeah,
why
but
would
I
it do
honestly
that?
don't know when he chooses how to actually do it.
Yeah.
Sometimes he does it, sometimes he does not.
I guess I wonder whether it's time. When you spend so much time on one thing, it means it's the more dominant. But then, you know, if you work on the
Or
left
the
or the
one
right.
where you currently have something collapsed might also be when you have an action collapsed.
Yeah.
I can admit that Power BI has less bugs, for example, than Power Automate has.
Ah, okay.
Good. So now we generated our report. So this was get user data. Of course, now we'll also need to generate the CSV file that we needed. We are not going to customize the columns. So we are just going to tell him take the first table rows, which was our data.
So what we could do is we could say for each user, you could customize the rows that you wanted.
Correct, because I mean, that's actually something we are doing. So that's why we did run the loop, so that we do customize the report that our users will be getting. Now, we did have two things that we did in the previous session. We had the report, and then we also had the output, meaning what is the total number of bookings that the user has.
Yeah.
So this was our simple cart. If I'm going to go here, it was this one. I do have already a filter, but I didn't have the offset. So let's search for the week offset. Let's add the filter as well. It's going to be greater than, and it's going to be greater than 0 because we don't want the current week. Again, I need to run it. He ran it already because I still had the recording on. So when I changed the filter, he did refresh it. That's why I already see the card in here. Let's open it in DAX review. We can take this one. We can copy it. So no, in here. Now, if I don't want to select all the items each and every time, what I can do is copy to clipboard. So I went on the step which was saying get user data. I open up the menu and I clicked on copy to my clipboard. When I go to add the new step, now I have to my clipboard in here. Let's paste this one. And as you can see here again, switch sides. Very nice. Sometimes Power Automate is really amazing. Let's rename it. So that was get user total. And I see that I already have all the details filled in. I would only need to replace the actual statement because I did have it copied to my clipboard. So let's select everything. We are just going to go here on the user A. We need to scroll down. We don't want the output of the report data. We want the output of the extract user ID, which was exactly the step that we had right here. And for the sake of time, there's something we are going to do now. So let's say that I'm going to run it just so that we see that it's working properly. And it does. We are fine. Let's check if he did export. So I see that I have the total bookings for the respective user. What I need to pay attention here, and that's something that I did face on my own. When I'm running this individual level query, that's going to return me the table with a single row, which was the single value. So one row, one table, but it's still a table. I need to make sure that if my user doesn't have any bookings, I'm not going to get an empty array, because if my user has no bookings, then that means there's no data, because the result would actually be blank. So we do have the simple option, which is I can use a measure within Power BI, which would be using something like Colesce, who's going to return me a 0 instead of the blank value. Or we also have here the option which says nulls should be included, yes or no. Now, I prefer the option with the Colesce because even if it's 0, I would still want to plot a 0. I wouldn't want to plot a null. But that's an option. And now, since we are still here, there is the last option that I would want to show you, which is how we can make use of the thin personation. We went to all the trouble to actually get the user ID, to run the query against the user ID. I did have the dynamic row level security because I did wanted to show you something. When I run this query, and I'm just going to generate a new step in here, a compose step, and I will show you why. So let's call it compose user, or you can call it UPN from user principal name. That's the actual main user ID that we use within Microsoft 365 at the tenant level. The UPN is going to be the unique value for each user. I know the structure of my UPN, so I know that it's going to be, where is it? Okay, it's going to be the extract user ID. I'm not going to write an expression, even though I could have written a concatenate in here. We're not going to do that. We are just going to take the easy and lazy way. So that's my compose.
Yeah.
What I could do is now, instead of running the loop, even though I did wanted you to see how you can actually run the loop on a DAX query by combining the two queries, I could also get the user ID and then just impersonate the user in here.
Nice.
And that's going to inherit also dynamic row level security.
So the dynamic row level security comes through too.
Correct. When we run with that in a personation, this means that it's still going to enforce the same security that's out there defined. So if I have row level security, it's going to run it. If not, it's just going to run like the user would just open up the report. But if I have row level security, I can actually make use of it.
That's quite nice.
The impersonation feature can actually come handy in some of the cases.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, loads. So nice. I want, any questions from anyone else? That's really useful to understand how you can you actually just start at the top of the flow, right at the beginning, and just in non-computing speak, just run through each step, just really, really simply. You don't have to. So just at the beginning, just to explain simply what each step does, like the flow chart behind it. That I don't know if anyone wants that. It might be my brain just being a bit slow, but
you do want a holiday break, so that's acceptable.
Yeah, just
No, but let's do it. So
yeah,
first, and the most important item that we have right here is the actual trigger.
Yeah. So we trigger
can be standalone. They can be on a recurrence basis. They can be manually, meaning when I click the button, or they can be automatic.
Yeah. Then we set our variables.
Correct. Why we do this is because if we would actually store the workspace ID and the semantic model ID, this would actually help us down the line whenever we might have a change.
The once.
Correct.
So that's perfect. Yeah.
Then we run the query. Now, even though we didn't renamed it, in the first query, we were just extracting the list of users for which we need to run the personalized queries.
Yeah.
So this was providing us the base, the user base.
Yeah. So this is giving us our array, really. Yeah.
Correct. Which we then composed because we only wanted a part of the array.
Yeah.
What we did then is we needed to loop because we had 3 users. We needed to actually run some queries for each and every one. So that's how we create a loop. In Power Automate, we do this with the apply to each step. That's going to be a loop. In the loop, we actually tell him take the compose step and take each row one by one, and then execute the following steps.
Brilliant.
How the loop works is he takes the first value, he runs the steps, then he moves on to the next step.
Yeah.
What we did then is from the actual array, we just needed the ID value. So we need to know, is it user A, is it user B, is it user C? That's why we had the compose step, which was extracting the value for us. Then we ran the first DAX query against the semantic model, which was saying, get the report with the future bookings for the current user that we are on in the loop, which was nothing else than the previous step, the extract user ID. So here he was knowing which user it is. He was getting the value, user A, user B, user C. Then he was providing the value in here and running the query.
Nice. Yeah.
Again, we need to compose it because if we want to use it as part of a CSV, we of course need to take the array.
Yeah.
We generated a UPN because we did want it to also get it ready. So in case we want to use the impersonation, we can actually do it. But that was just a temporary step. And then we had the final one, which was just extracting the single value for the future bookings that the user will have. In the first session, we just did 2 more things. Is we extracted also the value from this step in here. And then we just sent the email out.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. It's having that looping and the conditions that
Correct.
I found.
Which was
I'm paying lots of attention. I'm ignoring them in the chat. I'll answer their questions in a minute, only because there's something I need to do work-wise for this to build a report from a semantic model that will run based on a certain condition that changes within the data set and send it out to certain people. So for me, this is actually going to be something I'm going to be using commercially. And also I like having a wrap up. So okay, let's go to the questions, and we're going to keep these in order. Anthony said, is this all premium or pro?
No, every functionality that we use today was actually not using any sorts of premium connector or action. So we don't need a premium Power Automate license for it. Everything that we did today can actually be done with any kind of license, starting from F1 because I did my homeworks. So until E1, E3, and E5, all of them will actually allow us to do it. So we don't need any kind of premium license. What where a thing comes on, and that's worth mentioning, is there is a separate action in here which is run a paginated report.
Yeah, that's premium, isn't it?
It's the action itself is not premium, but Power Automate never inherited also the change making, knowing that paginated reports exist now also in Pro.
No. Yeah. Okay.
So it will ask for your paginated report to be published on a backed by a premium capacity workspace.
Yeah, or PPU.
It doesn't work with PPU. I tried it out. It only likes the premium capacities.
Oh, yes. It is. Henrik said, is Power Automate Desktop better or worse? I assume better or worse than Power BI. Is that right?
No, I think he's comparing it towards the cloud flows that we can actually build. That would be my assumption. And the answer would be Power Automate Desktop and the cloud serve different purposes. So see the cloud flows like actions that you want to perform more in the cloud, and then look at Power Automate Desktop more like an RPA solution. So with robotic process automation.
Okay.
I wouldn't compare them between them because they kind of serve very different purposes.
Okay. And you can also use Power Automate in Power BI Desktop, which is similar but different. I found. It's
never
not great.
Thought of it.
Yeah, no, I tried it and it was I found the Power Automate itself, but you can engage in it when you're using Power BI Desktop as well. JP said, me attempting it for the first time got a different error. Progress.
Changing errors, it is definitely something better.
Yeah. Fernando said, next time do it with Fabric Data Activator. So we're going to push that back to Fernando and say, we're ready for your presentation, Fernando, whenever you would like to share that knowledge with us. Yeah, Henrik said, yeah, it was compared to Power Automate Online. And Cristian said, oh yes, please put up your location. It takes 5 seconds. And Fernando said it's a different animal. Yes, please, if you can fill that in, that would be great, because we had a huge variety of people. Any other questions, Cristian?
If not,
and look at you, 7:02.
Yeah, but I would still need 2 more minutes for it. So I just wanted to talk a bit about use cases that we used.
Yes.
So I think the first use case we ever had with running DAX queries against a dataset was for identifying integrity violations between dimensions and fact tables. We had some fact tables which we were maintaining, some dimension tables that were maintained manually.
Yeah.
So what we were doing is we were running the queries in case we were getting values. We were sending out a Teams notification saying, hey, the following products need to be mapped in a dimension table. Then we had the second one, which we didn't deep dive today, but was more around chasing users, providing them a summary. This is the number of bookings you did last week. Please do your job and act them in. And for this one, we can use something called adaptive cards. I'm not going to deep dive today into it. Who's curious enough can search for adaptive cards.
Were they quite easy to use?
I wouldn't call them easy, to be honest. No. They are nice. So I do have one open to show you an example. So let me also paste this one in the chat. I think you might remember them because I did
you showed me them once before. Yeah.
So
and Fernando
adaptive cards are something that we can use to have them more in-app interactive. I will not be able to send it per email, but I will be able to, for example, send it on a Teams message.
Yes.
Where I can customize the details and I can also use dynamic values in here. So when I had the future bookings, I could have put my value in here. And then in here, I would have been able to have it dynamic. If they are simple to use, to generate them, yes, but they have some caveats. Adaptive cards are normally designed whenever you are expecting an action. If I would send you an adaptive card and I would have a loop of 3 users, it will get stuck on your first adaptive card that you have received and not go forward with number 2 and number 3 because it's designed to actually take an action from it. it either provide an input or do
see.
something.
So it needs something to happen to it for it to move on.
Correct. The alternative is I can go into Power Automate when I have the card, and then I can go to the settings, and on the settings I would be able to define a timeout period, in which I would say, if Sue is not doing something within 1 minute, please move on.
Okay.
This is the workaround, however, because if you are going to look at the history of your flows, all of them are going to show up as timed out.
Oh, okay.
So it works correctly, but no, it will go mad.
Yeah, I think I'll focus on the actual structure of getting the flows to work first. Fernando said, can you play it and just show the final result, show it working?
Yeah, we don't really have final outcome because we didn't send out the email, but let's do a test.
Yeah. I just think it's amazing what you can do. I know I'm starting to use it more and more, and with Power Apps. Like embedding Power Apps into Power BI.
We had the list of users that we generated. Then we went into extracting only the ones that we were in a testathon.
Yeah.
And then we had the steps.
Yeah.
We first got the user, so we know we were running the query for the user A.
Yeah.
We then provided him the input with the details of the user A, which was then giving us out the output with the details for the user A, which was the row report. We composed this one so that we have it nicely as a CSV in case we want to use it further. Then we composed the UPN, which we actually didn't use to impersonate. And then the last step was to run a similar query, which was providing us the single value, the future bookings. So this user has a total of 87 bookings.
Yeah.
Now, so what we want to do with it further, that's up to creativity. You can also use it as an alert functionality. If Fernando mentioned right data activator, now not everyone has a Fabric capacity. So imagine that you could also run something like this to actually trigger an alert when something drops below a certain level. This could actually trigger a notification or an email to some department head, for example.
Yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. Okay. That's really, really good. We'll just know. Yes, I would agree, JP. Tonight's session just reiterated the importance of learning more than just Power BI. Yeah, they do contribute. I found it particularly, if you work so hard to get this really lovely semantic model that pulls everything in, then you can you can apply it to everything, can't you? To sending emails, to Power Apps, to writing information, to pulling all sorts of things in.
And it can actually be helpful also for more simpler things. I started first learning about Power Automate when I realized that, for example, I can refresh my data flows on an automatic trigger. So I would not need to wait for the schedule of the data flows to refresh. Whenever the file was getting saved, this was triggering the refresh.
Yeah. Yeah.
The nice part was then to also refresh the data flow, wait for the data flow to refresh, and then further on refresh the data set.
Reports. Yeah. Yeah, the data sets. Yeah. For some reason, we've got a model. Oh, right. Okay. He works with models, laughing. A despair.
What I did wish that Power Automate would have, and it doesn't have, is an actual trigger for the semantic model refresh. It doesn't have something like this. You can initiate the refresh, but it can't have a trigger saying when the refresh is complete on the semantic model, which was a bit weird. I mean, they created...
Oh, so you can trigger, so when a data flow is finished refreshing, you can then get your data set to refresh, but you can't get your data set to refresh.
I think I can actually show this quickly. Let's give it a menu trigger. It does name test.
I'll leave it recording just while you show this, and then I'll turn it off.
So if I'm going to search here for a data flow, I can select to refresh it. Then I can add a new step. And in here I need to pay attention because now I'm not going to add an action. I need a trigger. So I'm going to go to the trigger section and say when this completes. So he's going to initiate the refresh. He's going to wait for it to finish. And of course, we still have it with the datasets. Then I could initiate also the dataset refresh. But the downside is I don't have a trigger on the dataset. So if I would want to run a solution like we just created, I would need to be able to calculate very carefully the delay that I need to add in minutes before running also those queries, for example. It kind of blew my mind how they created them for data flows, which were added later as actions in Power Automate, but we never had something like this for datasets. I don't know.
So there isn't a when a data set finishes, when a data set completes, do something else. Oh, no problem, Marion.
There are options that you can use, like running some APIs until it actually finishes, but this requires you to have an app and have the service principal created for you.
Yeah, so
it's kind of a nightmare. So, or
yeah,
just
exactly. When you put it
and
like that, just to be able to put when a data flow refresh completes, do this, refresh a data set. Yeah, we can all do that actually. Yeah, there were 26, Cristian, in the chat. Cristian saying, please, can you fill in the form so we can see where you're coming from? Yeah, ideas.powerautomate, because that just seems a no-brainer, really.
I see Hendrik has a question. So there are two sides of it. In theory, they should not. There should not be a limit. What I did notice is that on the dataset he doesn't have, but on the data flows, he's limiting to 24. So after 24, within 24 hours, even though in theory he should not crash, he will crash.
Okay,
brilliant. In theory, he should not, because Power Automate was considered, at least on the dataset level, it's considered to be a development refresh. So it's not counting towards the standard data or 24.
So it doesn't count towards the standard.
On the dataset, you can actually do how many you want.
Well, yeah, because I guess you're doing a manual report.
Yeah, it's like you actually do the manual refresh. So it would be the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to stop recording now and get Cristian to show us where he's captured the location. Refresh through PowerShell. He hit the limit. Okay. Cristian, thank you. That was absolutely brilliant. The hour just flew by. Really flew by.
Yep, it did.
So yeah, huge thank you very
Jason
much.
raised a hand.
Yeah, so okay. Jason, did you have a question? If you have a question, please feel free. I'm going to stop recording. Great session. I'm going to stop recording, so please feel free to unmute yourself, show yourselves, and oh, sorry, an error. I think he was clapping. No worries, Jason. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the session, and hopefully we'll see you on a live session soon. Take care and have a lovely Christmas. Bye-bye.